Hello, friend. This is To Live the Truth, the podcast. My name is Ryan Clawson. In this show, we sit down to dive a little deeper into the concepts in my book, To Live the Truth, which you can read for free at ryantclawson.com/tolivethetruth. In each episode, we address one chapter in a sort of book club format. So far, we've discussed the nature of eternal truth, that like a tree, all truth is connected and layered, much of which is hidden from our view. We've discussed how in order to access greater peace and success, we must discover truth and align our lives more closely with it. And we've considered some of the obstacles that can hinder our search for truth, particularly overconfidence in our own understanding and fear of truth. This week, my delightful wife Allie and I talk about Chapter 4, The Word is Given to Men, Women, and Children.
So at the end of the chapter, we have this summary. First, throughout history, many inspired men, women, and even children have shared bits of truth in living books, as well as in other forms of living media. Living media is media teeming with great and vital ideas that nourish and broaden your mind. All art, media, recreation, and even social interactions can be deemed either living or twaddle or somewhere in between. And as we try to consume living media and limit our consumption of twaddle, ideas will enter our minds, potential truths to adopt into our lives. So, we probably, as a refresher, should clarify what living media and twaddle are. I don't know, how would you define those two things?
Yeah. So I've been excited about this because I feel like living media and twaddle, those are like two common words in our household, especially with homeschooling and stuff. Like all of our kids know those terms. But my favorite way to envision this, well, I guess living media or living books, they, like you said, they're teeming with ideas. So they are feeding our minds and our souls with ideas. And I love the image of a feast. And it's just like we need to feed our bodies with healthy, nourishing foods. We also need to be feeding our minds and our souls with healthy, nourishing ideas. And it comes from a certain type of media or a certain quality. So I don't know, that's my favorite way to view it, just as a feast. And you mentioned in your book, twaddle is going to be your sugars and your junk food and your Twinkies. Some worse than others, but you can't survive on that. That's not healthy.
Yeah, and the truth is, I don't love the word twaddle because the sound of the word kind of carries with it a certain feeling that I don't think perfectly aligns with how I view twaddle. Twaddle sounds like nonsense, like just gibberish.
Baby.
Yeah, which I think is part of it, right? Often you can come across something that is just nonsense, but I think twaddle can be written in a very entertaining and even in a way that you can follow along fine. It's not necessarily nonsense. It's logical, but still void of real ideas, right? It doesn't reflect reality. It doesn't reflect nature, human nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, but often it is kind of nonsensical, so maybe it is a good word. I don't know.
Right. I don't know. I just view it as more, it's just shallow.
Yeah.
It may just kind of show, I don't know, just life at its very surface.
It's very superficial, is what
Yes.
you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree, but I don't think it shows life at all. I think that superficial view of life is actually a lie. It's mistaken. And, and I'm not saying this is the right way to consume media, but my way of consuming media is I'm always trying to imagine what the creator of that media is trying to say or accomplish. What's their message? And there are certain movies that I would deem twaddle, where I'm very certain that the creators were just trying to appeal to certain passions that we have, certain fantasies, right? So lots of movies portray the leading woman as a two-dimensional posing bimbo who has no brain or character. She's just the beautiful woman to pose throughout the movie and also, be kind of a sex idol for the leading man. It doesn't reflect real like I've watched some of those movies and I've just wondered, like, has the writer and or director ever met a woman? Because this is not how women behave. And then also, like, on the other hand, there's the action films that just decide to abandon reality and physics.
Right.
Anyway, we have these questions, which again are kind of like before. They're more introspective questions, but I think these are questions we actually could talk about. It might be kind of fun to answer these questions. The first question is, what kind of books and other media do I tend to consume? So I don't know if we want to maybe talk about some of the books or movies that we enjoy reading. You don't have to talk about necessarily what you are reading now, but something recently or whatever.
Well, I did want to say, as I was thinking about this, I feel like we've tried lately to get into the classics. Like, I haven't always loved classic literature, but since learning about like living media and starting to homeschool, we decided to pick up some of these classics, and they are filled with ideas and they're very living. But I wanted to bring this up because, like, it's not that we've always been interested in them. I feel like classics and like living media, living books, they're the healthy course of a meal. So they're not always
Page turners.
Page turners, yes. And they're not like what you're just naturally drawn to. Like, I feel like it takes work and you have to be disciplined and intentional. But when you do consume it, you realize like how great it is and how filling it is and how much it's benefiting you. And some of them do become page turners, but it's the way I feel when I'm reading the book, and afterwards I just feel like it's really fed my soul. Like, and it's uplifted me, and I just feel like a better person, a more educated person. I love it. Mm-hmm. So right now I'm reading Jane Eyre, and it's really fun.
Yeah,
that one is a page turner if you need a good book.
Yeah, it's been hard for you to put that one down.
Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, it should be clear that living media doesn't necessarily have to be classical literature or an old film or classical music even. It's not inherently that you'll only find living art or living media in the distant past. And you can find modern books that are teeming with ideas and that are living. However, I mean, we've kind of stumbled upon classical literature and stayed there, really. I mean, I think a big part of it is that these books that have stood the test of time, so if you pick one of them up, it's a pretty safe bet that it's going to be a living book. Mm-hmm. Whereas, you go down this year's New York Times bestseller list, it's kind of a toss-up. And in many ways, just by the nature of art, most of them will not be living. That's just the nature of it. And that's how it's always been, right? I mean, the same year that Jane Eyre was published, there were probably hundreds of books that were released that year as well. And most of them faded into obscurity because they weren't of that high quality. So that a listener who maybe is in the habit of reading and then hears this and jumps to the conclusion, oh man, I have to read classical literature, and if I'm going to meet this standard of reading living books, I would say no. I mean, start where you are, read what you can get through, I mean, and you and I didn't start here. We've kind of worked up to it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But you can find beautiful, great, vital ideas in lots of different kinds of media and art. And this is one area where you and I have kind of disagreed. Well, I say that the largest contributing factor to whether a piece of media is living or not is the way you consume it, is your consumption habits, right? And I even say you can get so good at extracting that single grain of pure knowledge, even from a piece of literature that's maybe a little bit more like twaddle, and you've kind of pushed against that and said, well, I think that living is more objective than what maybe I would argue, which is interesting. And I see that, but I want to leave room open for someone who isn't necessarily ready to plunge into Jane Eyre or Shakespeare or Charles Dickens or something. Yeah, just be kind of more conscientious of the media you're consuming and just kind of make moves in the right direction and ask yourself the questions that we're addressing right now, right? Like the next question is, would these media qualify as living, or do they more closely resemble twaddle? And why do I choose to consume this kind of media? And again, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is really the way you consume media and the reason you consume it contributes to maybe not the objective livingness of that piece of media, but it definitely contributes to how much you're going to get out of that book. You know, if you picked up Jane Eyre, but you just kind of lightly, idly skimmed over it and didn't really read it and think about the ideas that she's sharing, it wouldn't really be of any use to you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It would almost be like licking broccoli or a beet instead of actually digesting it and letting those nutrients get into you. You know what I mean? I don't know, kind of a weird analogy, but what do you think about that?
So I started thinking about this and how I've disagreed with, that part. Every time you talk about it though, like I see your side and I like do agree with parts of it. And I feel like going back to my favorite analogy, the whole feast analogy, I don't think it would ever be good to have a table full of Twinkies and cakes and candy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that would ever be good, no matter how you're choosing to eat it. But I do think that there is a place for sweets in a feast,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if you want the rich feast, I mean, yeah, you would enjoy a table full of treats, like in the moment. But like if you want it to really sustain you and nourish you, then I think you need to buckle down and eat the healthy stuff, I guess if you're not eating anything, you're not willing to eat the broccoli or the healthy stuff, then sure, eat the Twinkie.
Yes, and I do agree with you on that too. And the argument I would make is that there is nobody on earth right now who is not consuming something. And that might be a bold statement. There's no American who's not
yeah.
consuming something. I mean, how many billboards or signs or even just, advertisements. I mean, if you own a phone, you are consuming something, whether it be YouTube or social media. So you are being force-fed many, many ideas, most of which are certainly twaddle, just not living ideas, right? And so I guess my invitation, regardless of where you're at, like just take one step towards a little bit more healthy of a diet. And if you can't stomach Shakespeare, if you can't stomach Jane Eyre, then just try some book. And maybe even before that, I would say consider what you can eliminate from the media that you're consuming.
Mhm.
Just deleting that social media app or turning off the TV a little bit more, that may have a bigger impact than trying to pick up some classic novel, given your circumstances. It's all dependent on where you're at right now, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me think that all of this stimuli around us, all of these, social media accounts and TV shows and everything, it's saturating our feast,
Mm-hmm.
So even by eliminating those things, you can focus on the ideas that you have received. I don't know. I just think that they become maybe a little more clear to us.
Right.
So even if you're not going to add on these other living, more living media to your plate, then yeah, that's a great idea to take away things that are just saturating it.
Yeah. I mean, it's an invitation to be conscientious about what ideas are you letting yourself be exposed to and be influenced by. Because that's really the point, is that your worldview, your perceptions of truth are heavily shaped by the ideas that you're exposed to, right? There's that E.F. Schumacher quote I have in here. He says, "The way in which we experience and interpret the world obviously depends very much indeed on the kind of ideas that fill our minds. If those ideas are mainly small, weak, superficial, and incoherent, life will appear insipid, uninteresting, petty, and chaotic." And I have found that to be very true in moments where I've maybe not been as disciplined as I ought to, or just have from necessity been exposed to more of the vain media that is so easily accessible these days. I can feel a difference in my outlook, in my soul, Anyway, The last question is, what kind of ideas have I extracted from the media I consume? So you've been binging Jane Eyre.
Mm-hmm.
What ideas have you extracted from that book? It's a tough question.
Yeah. I haven't really formed the ideas into actual thoughts. I feel like when I read, a lot of times I have feelings.
Mm.
I see this character and I just love her and I want to be more like her because she's courageous and faithful to God and educated but simple. Doesn't need all the fancy things and she's just self-confident and yeah, I don't know. That's hard to hone it down to one idea.
Sure. Even just observing a human life at a close, intimate level.
Well, and I see how she acts in certain situations, tough, difficult situations. And I just admire her and I see where it takes her. Yeah, I think it's helpful.
Yeah. And many novels, I mean, it varies, but some novels are harder to draw out that central theme that the stories may be following, especially when you're in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the ending kind of wraps it all up and really presents you with the final thought and idea. But throughout the whole process, you're being fed certain ideas, and it's important to pay attention to whether those ideas are great, vital ideas. I want to resist saying things like good or positive or uplifting. I mean, like we've talked about before, there's comedies and there's tragedies. There's good endings and there's bad endings, and you can learn a lot from both.
Do you want to share what you're reading or?
Sure. Yeah. I'm in the middle of reading John Milton's Paradise Lost, which has been a bit more challenging than the typical book I read. So I want to make it clear that I'm not regularly reading heavy books like this necessarily. But I do enjoy the challenge. And it's considered one of the highest works of English poetry. It's definitely living. I mean, it's unbelievable. The level of knowledge and familiarity that Milton had with all kinds of works of classical literature, Greek myths and the Bible. And I mean, he quotes just back to back several different scriptures and mythical stories, and he fits it all into this story outlining the war in heaven before the fall of Adam and Eve, and it kind of follows Satan and all of his followers when they fell from heaven into hell, and their scheming of what they're going to do next. And Satan says, well, I hear that there's a new creature that God's created called man, and he's the pride and joy of God. Let's go see if we can mess up his project. Anyway, I'm only into book 4. There's 12 books within that book. They're kind of like chapters. But anyway, it's very challenging sometimes. Some of the poetry or some of the references that he makes, I don't know what the heck he's talking about. But luckily, in the copy I have, there's footnotes to kind of give me ideas. But it's dense, but it's really enjoyable in other moments. Some moments I'm just trudging through it, just trying to grasp whatever I can get. But then there's certain moments I love. I always love particularly works that reveal aspects of human nature. I feel like they're very soul-nourishing and educating and enlightening moments when I can glean a little lesson about human nature, And one of the quotes that we like, that we've heard before, is that the mind is a place of its own and can make of itself a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell, something like that, which is really interesting. And then he really explores the agency of Satan and kind of talks about how Satan lost his ability to choose and was only able to choose evil after he had fallen. Since I started reading, we've had several conversations because I'm trying to work that out in my own mind of how that works. How does agency work for a demon who has distanced himself from God, the ultimate source of goodness and truth and beauty? Anyway, I just love that kind of stuff that really just inspires questions and musings in my mind about big things. But yeah, that's what I'm reading right now. It's challenging, but it's satisfying for the most part. See if I can get through it all the way.
I think you're going to make people want to read it.
The one other thing I wanted to mention, if somebody were to ask me, what is the most living book? And this may seem like a cheap answer, but I would recommend the Bible or the Book of Mormon. That's what, and that's the funny thing is, like, with all of our arguing about whether you can stomach these highly living books, you can stomach the Book of Mormon. You can stomach the New Testament. That's a place to start now if you want to get into living books. Like that right there, you're getting really to the foundation, the central source of it all. Even as a non-religious person, if you're a Westerner, if you are a European or American, the Bible really is one of the foundation blocks of our society. And we take these things for granted, but our very language, if you're an English speaker, you have like it's you can't get out of the Bible. You can't get away from it. The very language we speak was formed by Christianity. It was formed by the ideas within the Bible. And so I feel like a big part of the purpose of living books is to become self-aware of your cave, right? Become conscious of what those shadows that you're observing every day, what they actually mean, what's actually behind them. You know, the way we think about our country, the way we talk, the way we view life, everything, every little aspect of our day-to-day lives are founded on, one, the Bible, two, the ancient Greek philosophers. So I would also lump in there Aristotle and Plato, as well as a lot of the old Greek poets like Homer and then Aeschylus and Aristophanes. And then finally, I would recommend Shakespeare, because he is really the ultimate fusing of those two, the Bible and the Greeks, which is why he also serves as a very big foundation block to our society. Again, more than we really take the time to realize a lot of the time. But you haven't read the actual play, but with homeschool, you've got a book of Shakespeare, written out in more of a narrative form that's more understandable for children. It's not necessarily super dumbed down. It's still beautiful, eloquent language.
Yes.
But it's much easier to follow than just reading the play straight up.
Yeah, well, I was going to say our 8-year-old son, he understands Shakespeare and he's enjoying it. I haven't tried like the actual play, but we have listened to the actual play and watched some of them. And yeah, he follows along and he gets it. And I think I do like the book that we're reading for homeschool because it's just a little bit simplified, but they tried to keep a lot of the language the same. It's still beautifully written and it takes some work to understand it. It's just a little bit easier and it's not in play format. As I've watched some of the films, I don't know, there's just something about it that just feels like really feeding your soul.
Yeah. And it's entertaining.
It is entertaining. It's fun. But even if you don't like catch on every word or every phrase, like you get the gist of it. And it's like they're very fun stories.
Fun and also definitely filled with thought-provoking ideas.
Yes.
Many scenarios arise in his plays that get you thinking about things, which I love.
Right.
Anyway, we've probably lost every single listener at this point because fighting a losing battle trying to convince people. Right. Shakespeare, yeah, right.
I think you just need to start with the intention of trying to find the living ideas in whatever you're reading, like you said, and that will naturally draw you to more living media. Like you said, just start where you are. Start thinking about why it's important. Like we are trying to feed our minds and nourish our souls, and it's just as important as nourishing our physical bodies. And with that knowledge, you're just going to be drawn to better works. So don't worry about making your list or it being daunting right now. Just start with good intentions and the why behind it all.
Truth is accessible, one bite at a time. You just gotta start looking for it. Find those works that contain those ideas that will feed your soul and lead you ever closer to that central trunk, that central source of all truth. You can find living media in any form: podcasts, movies, music, even some social media posts can be living, but it will be very few and far between. But my personal belief is that the very top of it is books, particularly works of fiction, where those deep questions about our existence are addressed and wrestled with. And it's been a great blessing in my life. But I finished the chapter with a quote from Alfred North Whitehead: "Ideas won't keep. Something must be done about them." So the rest of this first half of the book, we now kind of dive into what we need to do with those ideas. How do we determine whether those ideas that are being fed our minds are actually true or not? In the next episode, we'll begin this part 3 of the book about the nature of knowledge and how it's a little tricky sometimes to really pin down what is knowledge. Well, thanks again for joining me, Allie.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it. Additional resources can be found on my website at ryantclawson.com. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comments section and we will address them in a future episode. Also, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to this podcast. That makes us easier to find. Finally, I wish you peace and success, and I hope you can join me next week.